Before I live where I live now,
Look.
some property that bordered Boston.
I was a girl from poverty, like so many people in this country, with a single mom who had a 9th grade education and who raised 4 children in a very low wage job. I was a young, single mother who looked as though I didn't have a lot of opportunity ahead of me, and who ultimately made my way all the way through Harvard Law School because of a community college that gave me my first entree into a college education. And I wasn't voting. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. I had my head down, doing the best I could to survive. When I really first began to get involved was when I began to advocate for something. And all of the polling will tell you that young people, the way to reach them isn't by asking them to get involved in a political race or get behind a candidate. It's asking them to work on an issue about which they are passionate. That advocacy, the beginning step into working on something that you care about, which is what my experience was, I believe is the most important way to begin to build that next generation of people who are going to vote and who are going to ultimately run for office and be the folks who take us the direction that we need to go. I'll tell you that when I was running for the Senate in 2008, and I was running in a Republican district, and in Texas, a Republican district is a Republican district. And I was running against a 16-year incumbent, a bully, a senator who was the quintessential Texas senator with the cowboy hat, who was about 6'5", shock of white hair, and a big old cigar in his mouth. When I decided to take on that race, thanks to the encouragement of some people who believed it could be won, when I had the privilege of standing on the Texas Senate floor for 13 hours, unbeknownst to me, there were, as Jeannie said, a couple 100,000 people who were watching online. It motivated thousands of people to come to the Texas Capitol and to decide that rather than watching this unfold and being upset and concerned about what was happening to us and our reproductive freedoms, they were going to show up and they were going to be a voice and they were going to fight. And they literally are the ones who did something extraordinary that day. It wasn't me. It was the thousands of people who made the pilgrimage to our Capitol and who literally used their voices to lift us past the midnight deadline that night. The consequence of that, of course, was that that day in Texas got a lot of attention. And I was privileged to receive a lot of that attention from around the country. It was a very important part of my gubernatorial race because it made it a lot easier to call people and say, "Hi, I'm Wendy Davis, a senator from Texas, and I'm running for governor there. Would you please give me money?" We raised $43 million in our race as a consequence of what became from that day. But much more importantly than that, I gained a following of young women. And honestly, when the gubernatorial race was over, I thought that that would be over as well. I started traveling around the country and speaking where I was invited to speak, and I began to take notice of the fact that I still had this incredible audience of young women, and I was so pleased and proud to have it. Young women who have shared so many stories with me about the inspiration of that day and how it literally changed their lives and their direction and helped to be a part of a path that they began to pursue. And there's nothing more profound than feeling like you've had an impact on someone's life that you don't even know. So as I was observing that, at the same time, I was also traveling around the country and trying to figure out what I was going to do now. I wanted to continue to be a very important part of the conversation about gender equality. It's the thing I care the very most about in the world, but I didn't quite know how I could play that role. So I started talking to organizations everywhere. What are you doing? How can I plug in, add value, not compete, not replicate? And after a while, the marriage of those two worlds seemed to make a lot of sense for me. And the organization that I founded, a nonprofit initiative called Deeds Not Words, was born. Deeds Not Words is based on the motto of the suffragette movement. Tired of talk on giving women the right to vote and wanting to see action. And it was really very reflective of a question that I was getting from young women all over the country. Young women who are passionate, who are informed, and who want very much to make a difference, and who don't quite know how, and would ask, what do we do? How do we plug in? We really want to be a part of making a difference. There's a lot of talk that happens, as you know, on social media, and it's really important because it informs and engages us. But oftentimes it doesn't translate into action like it did that day in Texas. It translated into action when people showed up at the Capitol. So that is the backbone, the framework of this next chapter. It's built upon an incredible social media following that I have the privilege to this day of having. It's actually been growing, believe it or not. And it's quite dramatically larger even than Planned Parenthood's, for example. So we have something really positive to start from, and we want to leverage that. We do have a beautiful website that we invested quite a lot in, and I'll tell you, I